former or something like that. I mean, the way that they interrogated you, held you in communicado in a situation like that, it sounds like the old fashioned brainwashing or interrogation.
It was, let me just make it simple. To me, it was fascism.
Yeah, well, it was brainwashing here. Pretty soon you will sympathize with your oppressor, you know, if they continue to...
well,
you're weak, but you're a strong brother, and you were able to resist that and come back again.
yes.
So that's
this is what I seen. This is what I seen what was happening, because as soon as I got out of that place, the drugs was in my system. And I went back to Florida and I stayed in the mosque for 2 years. That's the only thing that brought me back. I stayed in the mosque for 2 years. And found with the brothers and my prayers and stuff, that brought me back. Now, this is what they attempt to do. I had a mass base there. I was supported. The national people supported me. The church supported me. The Catholic Church supported me. The nationalists supported me. They supported that leadership because we removed this drug. What I seen that they were doing was trying to, because when they kidnapped me, no one knew where I was but a few people who threw me out. But whenever they were asked, where is Abdul Qahhar, they said he was in Harlell. But I wasn't in Harlem. I was in an old building in the woods next to a medical center. I believe what they tried to do is destroy me and set me back on the street. See, so that I'm talking nonsense. See, the master said, man, this brother done gone crazy. See, this is what I believe they were doing. And to make the story short, they're doing it now. The military, which is the government, doing drug experiments. They're doing drug experiments in the prison because they got a captive body there. What are you doing drugs?
They always do this to blacks. Just like back in the Second World War, they took some blacks down to Alabama and used them for syphilis experiments. They exposed them to syphilis, you know, and then tried to practice cure on them. I mean, it is a truth that black people are being used as guinea pigs. And I think when we get back, we'll talk about black leadership. I think that it's the dearth of black leadership, and they're not standing up anymore, and they're giving the government more of a license to do all of these things. But back to you, brother. Would you kind of explain a little about the newspaper article up there?
What I'd like to do is first point you to what we see as the article that came out of the Columbus Dispatch on Labor Day. I had an opportunity to do a drug, violence, and juvenile delinquency workshop in Columbus, and by the grace and mercy of Almighty God Allah, an hour before I spoke, an imam from Akron, Ohio, showed me the Columbus Dispatch, which detailed the CIA-Contra cocaine conspiracy linked to the LA gang. So it even deals with the picture of a young man by the name of Freeway Ricky Ross, who was introduced to the cocaine conspiracy by a CIA operative by the name of Benitez. Benitez worked directly under CIA contract employed by the name of Blandon. Why are these things important? Because Blandon worked directly under Felix Rodriguez, who was a CIA operative who worked directly under Donald Gray's assistant to Vice President George Bush. So we have a direct link between George Bush, Donald Gray, under the auspices of the so-called Special Situation Group. Why is that important? Because when the Special Situation Group was developed, that meant that the CIA control over the operation was now diverted to the White House because of what we call the Bolin Amendment, which took funds away from the CIA operation in Nicaragua. So that meant that the cocaine was even further introduced into the black community in more massive amounts than it was in 1980. Now, the key thing is that this man by the name of Blandon, who worked under Donald Gray, who worked under George Bush, has never spent a day in prison. And he has over 45 investigations by the DEA, the FBI, immigration, every law enforcement agency, LA Sheriff's Department, LAPD, every law enforcement agency in America investigated this beast And every time the investigation got so far, it was canceled under national security interest. Menendez became a multi-millionaire, opened up restaurants all over Florida, California, and Latin America. He had direct access to El Salvador airports along with Blandon, which they have identified in pictures. American cargo planes leaving from El Salvador, coming to Nicaragua, going to a base in Texas, and from there to California. They have pictures of airplanes going from El Salvador to Mena, Arkansas. Why is that important? Because Mena, Arkansas was a base that was also used by the CIA, controlled by a man named Barry Seal, who worked under a man named Calero, who was also under Donald Gray. Barry Seal was assassinated in Florida a week before he was supposed to go give this information to a congressional person in Florida about his involvement with the CIA. And all of the dope guys that we ran into in King Kennedy that were out of Detroit, Michigan, said that they got their drugs from young men out of Little Rock, Arkansas, called the Chambers Brothers. And they got their drugs from Mena, Arkansas. The Bloods and the Crips that we engaged in King Kennedy said they got all their drugs from L.A.J. L.A.J. said he got his drugs from Freeway Rick. So clearly, we can show documented evidence of the devastation and destruction in Cleveland and other major cities throughout the Midwest in the United States that goes directly to George Bush. The pipeline is right there, the pictures are there, the names are there, and it talks about the drugs and the impact that it has on the African-American community, as well as the breakdown, the chain of command, which went right to the White House, that was put together by none other than George Bush, who had been appointed by Ronald Reagan to head up the anti-drug task force of the White House. So we see that he became the original gangster. He became the dope boy. And then he had all these other gang members under the auspices of the CIA, and then the little Bloods and Crips were used as tools and fools, as instruments of this overall government program. Freeway Ricky Ross was almost illiterate when he graduated from high school in L.A., and by the time he was arrested in Los Angeles, they said he had bought tons of cocaine. And when he got started, the thing to remember, cocaine was very expensive in America at the time. Nobody was snorting it except athletes, entertainers, and maybe some musicians and things of that nature. Within 3 months' time, crack cocaine was all over Los Angeles. Bloods and Crips were spreading out throughout the United States and all throughout the Midwest from Detroit and Chicago area as well. So we can see that the government of the United States under George Bush actually used the gangs to distribute this death and destruction throughout the African-American community, and turned around and tried to say and use them for political purposes so Ronald Reagan and George Bush could get elected to office with Willie Horton and all of the ads that they used in elections to use the black community as a political football to get in power to continue to sell drugs and commit genocide and crimes against humanity, and also obstruct justice and use the CIA, which is a foreign intelligence agency, to be involved illegally in domestic illegal activities in the United States.
And during that Bush regime, we know that several large banks laundered drug money.
Right.
But doesn't it strike you as ironical that this country could go over to Kuwait about our oil interests? They even went to attack this little tiny island over there. Reagan sent the Marines. They shot up a mill hospital, and they said that the people over there were a threat to us. They were communists, when the police department of Cleveland probably could have captured that little island. But doesn't it seem ironical that this country, with all its might and military, could not put a blockade around Colombia, go in and tell the president, you can't do the job, we're coming in here, we're going to find the people doing the dope, destroy these plantations and replant them with soybeans or coffee at our expense, and you can sell it back to us, and when we leave, everything would be wiped out. We want to know what's on every plane that leaves here, every ship. Now, this country could have interdicted like that with some meaningful force, because it's done it on everything else if it was the oil interest. But this country, anybody would have to be almost a buffoon not to see that this country made no real meaningful effort to stop the drug from coming in from Colombia. And that is one of the biggest threats to our country today. It has poisoned all of these young people's minds and adults and done the devastation that it's done.
See, one of the things, just to interject one thing, not only did they not do anything about it, they created it. According to this documentation right here, the whole aspect of crack cocaine had been developed as early as 1980 because there's information now that was done by a Southern California researcher that shows that the CIA had information about the smoking of paste cocaine in Nicaragua.
And when did Noriega allowed to
and
the country excused him, the CIA, and allowed him to be a big dope trafficker?
Right. In 1974, they had been investigating this man Juan Menezes. So they were already aware. According to some gang members. Now this is documented. We got information. There was a young man who was a part of the Young Boys Incorporated. This is extremely important. He was served in Vietnam under Oliver North in the Phoenix program. And he was, his job was to be dropped behind enemy lines, so-called enemy lines in Vietnam, and destroy villages and to kill people along the border. They called the DMZ zone, or whatever that zone was, where people were alleged to be sympathetic to the North Vietnamese. And they were terrorizing the people, killing people, burning up villages and things to make the people not be sympathetic to the North Vietnamese. Now, he said that as early as in 1970, they were bringing back heroin in the bodies of dead Vietnamese and dead American soldiers through what was called the Golden Triangle. And a man by the name of General Secord, who was also part of the CIA operation, working with George Bush and Oliver North, were part of that conspiracy. This man said he was contacted in Detroit in 1975 or 76 by an operative that worked under General Secord and Oliver North to get involved in heroin selling in Detroit. And the Young Boys Incorporated is documented were involved in selling thousands of dollars of heroin and marijuana. What happened, he said they were invited to Panama to meet a man by the name of Omar Torrijos, who was then the president of Panama, to introduce crack cocaine in the early 1979 into the United States. They had a meeting about it, and one of the Secord's assistants who worked under Oliver North was there at the meeting. And Omar Torrijos said he was not going to be involved in it because they showed him what the crack cocaine people that they had tried as guinea pigs, what it did to them. And he said he couldn't see why they would be involved in this because it would destroy large communities. And anybody who knows the history, Omar Torrijos was very dark-skinned Panamanian. Within 2 months after that time, he was shot out of the air in a helicopter.
That's right.
And he died as a result of that. And at that time, Oliver North installed Noriega in that position in Panama. The marijuana was slowed down in the United States. If you notice, in the early 80s, marijuana consumption went down because it was shut down by the Panamanian Mexican corrupt people that was tied into the CIA, and then crack cocaine flooded the United States. And Young Boys Incorporated was involved in the selling, and they were also tied into the Chambers brothers, who got all their cocaine out of Mina Air Force Base in Arkansas that was developed by General Secord and the CIA agents operatives in El Salvador. So clearly, not only did they not fight it, they created the genocide, they created the plague, and they were the conspirators of it.
Well, this is a wake-up call for America all over the country. And I mean, it's beginning to be more evidence of corruption at the highest levels of our government. And all of the American people should wake up to this. Stop being asleep at the switch before it completely destroys us. Before we go off the air, I would like to have a few comments about the impact of the lack of black leadership in also dealing with drugs. And I know that Congressman Stokes currently is investigating these charges against the CIA right today. He's trying to pursue some type of investigation based on this documentation and the evidence that has come out. But to me, there seems to be a lack of leadership in the community other than these smaller groups, like you gentlemen, head group. Harlell, you've done a commendable job with your reentry program of having these rehabilitated ex-felons to go out and to help the older people, to escort them to try to give them safe conduct throughout the neighborhood. I think that's very commendable. That's a part of what you're doing over there too. But what impact do you think that black leadership would have in decreasing drugs? And since we are at the forefront of the drug epidemic, what do you think that's lacking in black leadership? I mean, we have a lot of power, political clout and whatnot. We have a lot of black leaders at the top. But we also noticed that when the Spectre case was going on, a lot of our black leaders were talking about giving the police chief a medal, and they were helping to cover it up. Briefly, we have a few minutes left. What would you think about that?
Yeah, I'd like to say that about that, and I'd like to thank Maxine Waters and a lot of other people pushing for this here, and I'd like to see more, and Dick Gregory too, people put. You know, you're right, Mr. Jennings, there has been a very, very lack of leadership in the city in the last 20 years, and cocaine and crack has really devastated it. The streets are really taken over by people who are drug users, people who want to feed on the community, and a lot of activists have went into the house and closed the door. There's no doubt that Omar Ali Bey's life is threatened while he was doing drug marches. There have been Christian ministers that had bottles thrown at them. These young people, when you put crack cocaine in their hands and 9mm and Uzis, then activists, we've got to come out here with bulletproof vests. We've got to get something going. One of the things that happened was part of our community thought that this drug problem was just black folks taking drugs and just want to be lazy, didn't want to work. I think this caused a ripple effect, such as everybody sitting up saying, let's get rid of aid for dependent children, but not mention anything about racism, and these young black women and kids are not going to be able to get jobs. We've got the prisons, the taxpayers here in America spending billions of dollars with the so-called solution to end these problems, which we know it's not going to end. We know that the cutting down on aid for dependent children, this is going to slap us in the face. We're going to have more crime in our community, and a lot of people are saying, yeah, great, they're all drug dealers. Even people living in housing, if they find a piece of drug near their house, in their house, they throw it out of their apartment, people are in jail for little stems and stuff. We've never seen nothing like this here. And you're right. We're calling for the men in the community to come and stand up. Our Christian brothers can't go to church and sisters on Sunday morning. Our Muslim brothers cannot go to the mosques. People cannot walk down the street. You know, we've got to pull together, us 98%, and we got to break the back of it.
Well, the Million Man March, I mean, that was really something. That just goes to show you that black people can be unified. And I think that we should have more of that. And I know that you gentlemen were a part of it. Now, at the end of this program, we're going to say one thing while you're on that note, because Harlell had a personal loss in his family. You know, I, for one, knows that his son was murdered by a young man who was a member of a gang called the Wade Park Gangsters, who was a drug dealer and a drug addict. So this plague has touched everybody's family. His son was out in the community doing work, standing up, trying to intervene and mediate fights, working to bring the gangs together and stop the gang violence. And he was a victim of this thing. See, it's also the person, the persona that goes along with the drug dealers that people don't understand. Not just the drugs, it's the gangster mentality that develops out there. That's why Tupac is dead. Well, I'm going to have to thank you, gentlemen, very much for coming in here. You've done a very great job, you know, in bringing this out. At the end of the program, we're going to run an address and a telephone number. You are in the audience. We would like to have comment. If you have some comment to make, please call or write, and we'll be happy to take your comments. And we'll be back with more programs like this. We want to get these gentlemen back because we didn't have enough time to cover everything that should be covered. Thank you very much.